Alrighty. Okay, fantastic. So thank you, Kirsten, for that introduction. And some great conversations at the end there, and some great questions. And what I want to do now is kind of just take this forward. We're talking about change. We spoke a lot about the people side of change, some things to think about. What I want to think about now is a bit more of the systems side of the change. So in particular, how I would move to a hybrid cloud environment. So quick introduction. My name's Richard. Hello. I work for AvePoint. My contact details are there. I'm going to share lots of links and pieces of information during this session. I'll put them on Twitter later as well if you want to grab them. That might be a quick way of getting access to these resources. So before I go forward, just a really quick introduction to kind of who AvePoint are for those of you who don't know us, and I'll keep this really, really quick. But I think it's important why I feel that maybe we're qualified or we have the experience to talk to you about moving to a hybrid cloud environment. So as sure many of you know, we've been around since 2001. Working with SharePoint since it was Project Tahoe, and it was Microsoft's idea of where they were going to go with this, and things like groups and teams were just, no one had any idea of where the world was going to move to. We're a global company. In terms of awards, I should probably update that. We've got a 2017 Partner of the Year award as well. So for the last 4 years in a row, we've won a Worldwide Partner of the Year award from Microsoft, so hopefully that kind of shows a little bit about what Microsoft think of us as a vendor. And really, we'll skip forward. We help organizations with 3 things, okay? Migrating, so moving from one system, or moving data from a legacy system to a new system. That's what I'm going to focus this conversation this morning. Management, kind of making it easier to manage those systems once you move into new systems, and also sort of protection of data. So, again, with things like GDPR coming into force next year, it's really important now to make sure that you're not leaking data out of your organizations, who has access to data, you're purging data at the appropriate time. So we've got some tools around there. Anyways, that's my kind of introduction, my sales pitch done. We'll get into the interesting pieces now. So first of all, I just want to talk about this study. So I'm going to talk to you today about hybrid SharePoint and how you may migrate to it. So we took part in a study. We were a sponsor along with a number of other organizations earlier this year, all around hybrid SharePoint. And I think over 500 global organizations worldwide responded to this study. And they kind of told us, if they were using hybrid, why they were using hybrid, what they liked, what they didn't like, what the challenges were, what their plans were for going forward. And all of that was sort of published into kind of a nice report that you guys can take away and read. So the link's here. By all means, go and grab a copy of it. There's some really interesting pieces in that. And I'm going to use a lot of the stats out of that study going forward. And I don't know, somebody in this room may have even responded to it. So it's not an AvePoint study. We were just one of the sponsors, so it's not, it's not really about our product set. Anyways, so your choices, you want to migrate, you want to move to a new system. Kirsten was talking about that this morning. You've got some pretty tough decisions about where you go. So today you've probably got maybe some old on-premise systems, maybe old versions of SharePoint, probably masses of data in file shares. And this is one that we're seeing more and more customers speaking to us, particularly again with things like kind of GDPR coming into force next year. They're seeing file share as a risk, because within that file share, you might have all sorts of data, personal data, data for customers that have left the organization, data for parts of the business that you sold off 10 years ago, but you held because it might be useful. All these sorts of things crop up. And potentially, the fines for sort of holding that data are going to increase astronomically. So various different places you might be. So where do you go to? Do you go to a new on-premise platform, SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016, move to Office 365? I did a very similar event about a year and a half ago, and there was someone in the room today who had a big conversation afterwards about which one of these they go to. And we really spoke it through, and it was a tough decision because there was business drivers and IT drivers to balance, and it wasn't a straightforward call. Quick question, anyone in this room still got SharePoint 2007 today that you're using on-premise? Okay, wow, okay, not too many people, that's cool. I was going to call out, so end of support, officially extended support and all of that cool stuff ends on October the 10th this year. So if you are using that platform going forward, after October the 10th, that's it, you're not going to get any more support from Microsoft on that. So when customers say to me, hey Rich, should I go to the cloud? Should I go hybrid? Should I upgrade my version of, whatever system it is? I say to them, well, what's the business value? What are you trying to get out of this? What do you want from this platform? Are you looking for ways for people to, do records management? And we've got a conversation later on this afternoon all about how you can hopefully do records management better in the future. Do you want to provide search across your organization? Do you want people to build custom applications? So I would say, think about what you want, before you make a choice about which system to use. Because I think let's put this new platform in. Why? And it goes back to some of Kirsten's points. So in our survey that we spoke, we actually said to people, can you tell us what you're using SharePoint for today? We thought that would be an interesting question. And this, kind of, the bigger the word, the more people said it. Interesting collaboration is the biggest word. Fantastic word. If anyone knows what it means, come and speak to me, because, I have no idea. But we can see, some obvious things, collaboration, sharing, document, intranet. But then there's some much smaller words in there. So, things like project, things like platform, things like portal, kind of much, much smaller ones. So, again, fairly interesting, but, yeah, just worth thinking about what other people are using. So what I want to do now is, while we're talking about hybrid, is think about where you may choose to go, which platforms you may choose to move to. So we'll start off with SharePoint 2013. Oh, it does say 2013 on my screen. Why might you go here? So I'm going to try and go through some pros and cons to give you the benefits as I see them to help you make an informed choice. So one of the reasons I think you might go here, it's been out a long time, well known, well documented, lots of updates, incredibly stable. It's absolutely a good reason why you might go here. Is some hybrid integration. So if you have Office 365 and you want to tie the two together, absolutely possible with 2013 to some extent. Why may you not go here? Okay, so you're not going to get many future enhancements, right? It's an old platform. So if you're thinking of deploying this now, that's cool, but just be aware of that. I think those of us who've run SharePoint farms over the years have learned that, patching a SharePoint farm, running it at scale, it's a fairly challenging task, and Microsoft maybe didn't make it as easy as they could have in the past. They learned a lot when they ran that themselves in Office 365, and it's a lot easier with things like 2016. So you're gonna struggle there. And talking about support, SharePoint 2013's mainstream support ends in April 2018. So if you're about to deploy that platform today, you're about to move there, April 2018 mainstream support's ending. Now again, that's not a reason not to do it, but I think it's absolutely something you should consider if you're going to go to this platform. Obviously there'll be extended support, but mainstream support, April 2018, so what? Less than a year. Okay, so the next option, maybe we'll go up to 2016. So clearly there is a lot of benefits here. You're going to get some of the cool things from the cloud brought down. So for those of you who haven't looked into this or looked into it in detail, Microsoft made quite a big change in their sort of update model. So traditionally with SharePoint, you waited for a service pack, and the service pack came down. And it fixed some problems. It didn't introduce masses of new functionality. With 2016, we've now got these things called feature packs, and a feature pack actually brings new functionality to your platform. So some of the cool stuff they've done in the cloud, they'll bring it down and make it available on-premise. And they actually released the first one last November. So again, the velocity of change, you haven't maybe got to wait 3 years for an upgrade cycle like you've done in the past. So it's definitely a positive. Again, for some organizations, there is a prejudice against newer platforms, pre-service pack 1, and I get all that, and I'm certainly not going to say don't do that if that's how your organization works, but I would challenge whether that's really valid for SharePoint. I mean, the code for SharePoint 2016 has been running in Office 365 for years. We're now had a feature pack, so if this is your reason for not doing this, I want to challenge that if I was in your position. And then obviously, if there's anyone from Microsoft in the room today, they would say, don't worry about this, just go to the cloud, okay? It's the place where all the cool stuff happens. It's the place where you get these amazing things like Groups and Planner and Microsoft Teams. And later on this afternoon, we're going to be talking a bit about productivity. So Rob from Combined Knowledge is going to do a session. I'm going to do another session, and we're going to talk about some of these cool things and how you can choose which ones to use. And more importantly, how you can make sure your users use the right ones and don't kind of off in their own one. Much more kind of user-centric and kind of personalized. So stuff is surfaced up to me through the Office graph. A great example of that is I have the Delve app on my phone. Okay, I was off work last week, so I turned my work phone on Monday morning. I'm really good at turning my work phone off when I'm on holiday. I'm very proud of that. I turned my work phone on Monday morning, and it's like, hey, here's some updates for you. These are documents that people have changed that you work with, and we think you should probably read that you've missed out while you're on holiday. That's pretty cool. Okay, so again, a lot of more personalization here. Massive, massive pace of innovation and change. I'm saying it's a good thing. I've also got it as a negative thing down here, but we'll go with the good side at the moment. You get lots of new things. You get lots of new functionality. There is a public roadmap as well, which Rob will probably talk about this afternoon, so I won't steal his thunder, but there is a sort of public roadmap of what's coming, what you can expect. So whilst there's a massive rate of change, hopefully it shouldn't take you totally by surprise, but we'll let Rob cover that later on this afternoon. Negatives. So with giving the responsibility over to Microsoft, you do lose some control. Like change management is tough. If they want to change something, you're getting that change. You might be able to put it off, you might be able to delay it for a while, but that change is coming down the line, and you're going to have to move with it. So something to bear in mind. Planned features can be cancelled. So this roadmap's great because it says what they're planning on doing, but by being public, they sometimes change their mind. So just be aware that if you see something on the roadmap and you're going to 365 because of that, it's a roadmap. It's not a contractual commitment. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. There is a perceived difficulty of migrating up to the cloud. Data throughput, how do I get there? What about all of my different information? How do I worry about Active Directory? What if I don't want to put sensitive data there? I can't put data in the US. All these questions that come up. Now, I'm going to talk through some of the technology tools that we've got to help with that. And we're really lucky that after the coffee break, Andy from is going to talk about a specific piece of work. His organization has recently rebranded. I didn't want to say the wrong name there. We're going to talk about a specific piece of work that they've done with moving the Ministry of Defense to Office 365, which is 200,000 users. So what I would say is if it's possible to get an organization like the Ministry of Defense there, it's possible to work through these challenges. So I'm going to give you kind of the theory, and Andy will go through an amazing case study after the break. And throw as difficult questions as you want at him. And if you can't answer them, he'll politely say, I can't answer that. So here we go, the favourite son. What I thought then was, well, these are kind of where you could go. It'd be interesting to consider kind of where people are today. So again, I looked at that study we did, and this is kind of the world today for people who are on-premise. And we can see that the vast majority are on 2013. Actually, 2010 is still above 2016. So I guess the reason I'm putting this slide up is I've kind of said 2013 end of support is April 2018, should you be moving to that platform? Lots of people are still there. It's still very important. And I guess I want to sort of just temper my scare story is a bit of the wrong word, but just sort of temper it with this is where people are, this is where kind of the world is today. This was done across over 500 people, multiple geographies across the world. So it's quite an interesting one. We'll see there's a few people down here on 2003. I love it when a customer calls us to do a migration there because that's how I started working with SharePoint, so it's always a bit nostalgic for me. Anyways, let's go forward then. So why might you go hybrid? So I've said about 2013. I've said about 2016, I've said about Office 365. Why might you choose to mix the two together? What are some of the top things that people are doing? So again, I've pulled this out of that study, and for those of you who haven't seen charts like this before, the idea is the bigger the blob, the more people said that. So it's quite interesting that, OneDrive for Business is a massive reason to use Office 365 in a hybrid environment. So you say my structured collaboration, I want to keep on an on-premise SharePoint because I've got more control over it. But personal file sharing, Microsoft give me so much storage space. They give me a great mobile app. The sync client's better if you've got Windows 10, okay? So that's not surprising to me that was that high up. It's also not surprising to me that team sites were there. Again, for lots of quite basic team sites where you want to churn them out, use them quickly, blow them away. Again, I think that makes sense. Some of the interesting things were Yammer was quite small. So Yammer is always an interesting one. And again, I won't steal some of Rob's thunder on kind of which tools to use when, but I think I would have thought that would have been a bigger blob. At AvePoint, we heavily use Yammer for asking questions to teams across the world, finding out what's going on in different parts of the business. I thought that would have been higher, but anyway, so I thought it's quite interesting to see kind of why people chose to go for a hybrid and what the key reasons they went hybrid were. And again, I thought the app launcher would have been higher. So the app launcher is the ability to have that little thing in the top left-hand corner and kind of have the same navigation across both sets of sites. Anyways, cool. So we spoke a little bit there about hybrid. We spoke about some of your options about going to 2013, going to 2016, going to Office 365. Some of the ways that I think you should make decisions. So think about what you want it to do, then weigh up the pros and cons of the different platforms, and some of the things that people in the industry are using hybrid for today. What I want to do now is think about how do I get there? And as I say, I'm going to go through the theory of this, and Andy's going to talk you through a customer example of how we did this. So we at AvePoint, we've had migration products out on the marketplace since SharePoint 2003 came out. So we've been doing migrations for a long time. These are the 4 steps that we believe you need to go through to have a successful migration. You'll notice migration is the last step. 9 times out of 10 when someone calls us in and says, I've got a problem, something's not been successful, it's because they went to this last step and didn't do the first 3 steps correctly in the first place. So I'm going to walk through each of them now. So the first thing really is about discovery, understanding what you have. So Let's say we're moving from an old version of SharePoint. Cool. There'll be things that you have done to that platform that you cannot do in the cloud. Or there'll be features in the cloud that are better than what you've custom built on premise. So you need to understand what you've done in the discovery piece. Again, a great question when I go into meetings with customers and I say, so have you customized your on-premise very much? Oh, no, not at all. We run some of our tools over and go, oh, okay, well, this department that you gave some quite high power to, they've got really clever and they've learned JavaScript, so we need to kind of work through that as an example. So, discovery across different sources, and I think there's 3 different types of discovery that you can do. 2 of them you must do, 1 of them I recommend you do. First option is kind of file level analysis. So basically here I'm saying, how many documents have you got? How many duplicate files have you got? How many PSTs have you got on your file share that you don't want to put in OneDrive? How many videos have you got, etc. So this was kind of that first piece. That just really gets rid of kind of redundant data. A great one here is how many documents, particularly on the file share, how many documents do you have that no one in your business has permission to view? Really cool one to look at. I would suggest that you don't need to bring those files forward. The second one you must do is customization analysis. So if you're moving from an old version of SharePoint particularly, or from another, anything that's not a file system basically, you need to think about those cool things you built and did and work out how you're going to move those forward. You absolutely have to do these 2. I believe you probably should look at content level analysis as well. So what I mean by content level analysis is having some technology or a big group of people to open every document and basically look at the content and see what that content is. You know, am I about to migrate loads and loads of sensitive data, financial data up to this new environment? Am I holding data I legally shouldn't have? And again, I don't mean to bang on about it, but with the new data protection regulations coming next year, this piece here is becoming even more important, I would suggest. So you must do this one and this one. You probably should do that one as well. Great example for this one was working with an organization, I won't say the name, huge organization that speaks to customers like me and you. Every time someone sent them a letter over many years, they scanned that letter in and they OCR'd it and they put it in their document management system. There was a file server with a pretty front end. When customers write letters to you, they do things like put in their bank account details because they'd like a refund because they weren't happy with the service. They'll put in all sorts of personal information, and they were just going to move all that data up into a public cloud environment. We worked that through with them. We tagged it, and then we sort of, we put it in some different areas. We redacted some information out. There's loads of ways of handling it, but a great example of why content level analysis is important. Anyway, so once we've done that, we can think of duplicate files. Access age is a great one. If something's not been viewed in 10 years, is that a good thing to bring over? And this is really the challenge. In an organization, there's things you use, things you need to keep legally, and then all of this stuff. This organization here, so I was on Wikipedia just a minute ago. I think this building was built in 1880. Okay, so not going back that far, but I imagine there's a lot of documentation this organization holds. And, do we need to bring all that stuff across? It's a great example. I'm sure your organizations also are more than a couple of years old. This is a really important part. But if anyone's starting a new company, this is a lot easier. So there we go. What I think really it comes down to, though, is it's your data, right? So you've got to find out what it is, work out how to identify it, put the necessary protection on what is important, i.e. that sensitive data, let's protect that well. The less sensitive data we can be maybe a bit less slack about. Understand what's required, get rid of what's necessary, and plan for the future. Gives my users more relevant information, going to help with adoption, going to help with change management. If when I do a search, I find relevant information, not information from years and years ago that doesn't make any sense to me. Easier for admins, I've got less stuff to store. Kind of goes without saying that less stuff to store, backup's going to become a less arduous task. And from a compliancy point of view, lower risk. The less information I'm holding, the less risk I have that I'm holding the wrong information. It kind of seems a bit trivial, but hopefully it goes without saying. And there's loads of different ways to do this. We have some tools that can extract this data and then kind of present it to the business in different ways. Tell you what, let's have a quick look. We've got 5 minutes. Kirsten finished a little bit quicker. So what I've got here, I have got Power BI, everyone's favorite friend, where I have some analysis of an on-premise SharePoint site. So we have some analysis tools. I've just ran it over SharePoint. I've grabbed loads of data. And I've just made some quick sort of Power BI dashboards to look at this, because we just find that when we speak to the business, if we give them massive Excels and tell them what data they have, it confuses people. If we can start to browse through and click through and to say, hey, look, this area here, and show what's in it, show how many items are no longer used, we just tend to find we get a much better response and a much better conversation with the business. So let's jump into like item analysis, for example. I can then go in, oops, maybe my Wi-Fi's, yeah, there we go. I can then go in and say, okay, well, actually tell me the name of your site. So I can go in and say, my site is this one here. I can then drill into it, and I can start to, oh, I'm on the wrong screen. I can drill into it, and I can start to cut the information down and see how many documents I have modified in each year, etc. So this is just a visualization way, but something that is helpful when you're doing this. Cool. So let's go back to the presentation. Cool. So once we've looked at what we've got rid of some of that redundant data. We've thought about how we want to tag the sensitive data. We've thought about what we're deleting. We've considered the customizations we need to rebuild. Only then do I think you can start thinking about where you're going to go. And what I would say is you need to do your hybrid design, think about your migration methods, and think about your schedule. So in terms of design, think about what you're using this platform for. Maybe in my organization, I use SharePoint for these 6 things. Cool. I then decide, you know what? These 3 over here, I'm going to put in the cloud. These ones I'm going to keep on-premise. I'm not suggesting it has to be this split. This is just an example for a specific organization. Right, I've now got a split. I know what's going where. I can choose the right platform. Now I can think about the migration method. So am I going to basically tell everyone to stop working, move everything over, and when I'm finished, tell them they can use it again? Probably not in most organizations. But there may be some data you can do that to. If I've got an old archive that people don't really access, but it's just there as a matter of legal records, maybe I can take that approach. Maybe need to do a more managed migration where I kind of move the data over, I get the users to check it, give me feedback that it's okay, confirm the permissions, make any deltas, bring over any things that have changed. A much better experience for the users, but again, a much more time-consuming and costly experience because there's a lot more people effort involved. So again, what I recommend is you probably use a combination of these depending on which data you have. Legacy stuff that's not used, you use this. Managed, you use for the data that's changing more regularly. So how do I do a migration? Obviously, at AvePoint, we have a migration product, hands in the air, unsurprisingly, but I'm now going to talk you through the different ways you can do migrations. You don't have to buy a migration product. So I think we can put it into 3 main areas. Kind of manual or scripted approaches, tooled, or kind of like services approach. And again, I'm going to go through pros and cons. So manual approach, it may be possible. There are some out-of-the-box tools from Microsoft for you to do things like move content databases. That might work if you're just going one version. Maybe you're going to get your users to cut and paste their data over. So copy from here, paste into here. It might work if you can get the users to do it, but you're probably going to lose a lot of that metadata. Who edited it? When was it changed? Again, maybe that's appropriate for you. Maybe you've got some really clever developers who could write some PowerShell scripts to move data for you. Again, that would also work. So these are what I would say are the benefits of this approach. The negatives, I would say, is it's much harder to version hop, i.e. to go from 2010 up to Office 365. Or more importantly, go from Lotus Notes to Office 365 or Documentum or something that was never meant to do that hop. A lot more challenging out of the box. You often lose metadata in these approaches. So you often lose who edited it, when they edited it, what time they edited it. Something to bear in mind. Cleansing and restructuring can be more hard because you don't tend to have like a visual interface that you can drag things around and move it. So restructuring is often more difficult. And I'll be honest with you, it often ends up consuming a lot amount of internal resource. As AvePoint, I can give many examples. Obviously, I won't name customers who've said, we tried to do it ourselves, we tried to write some scripts, and then 6 months down the line, they've come to us and said, we'd now like some help. I'm not suggesting that's correct for everybody, but if you think it'll be quick, just bear that in mind. So the next approach is using a migration tool. So there's lots of migration tools on the market. We AvePoint provide one, that allow you to do all sorts of different things. So for example, doing things like SharePoint 2007 up to SharePoint Online. Lotus Notes up to SharePoint Online. Benefits, these tools, you normally got a third-party support. So if it goes wrong at 5 o'clock on a Friday, you've got someone else to shout at. You can do things like full, incremental, and ad hoc migration. So what I mean by that is, big department, move all their data over, might take me a week, for argument's sake. But I leave the users in their current source. And I just keep bringing changes over every night to kind of mop the data up. So from an adoption point of view, from a change point of view, the user impact is a lot less in this. They don't feel like they're being hampered in just getting their job done by an IT change. Still requires internal investment. You're going to have to teach your resources to use some tools. You're going to have to schedule it and do all the project management yourself. So there are some negatives. So I'm going to take just a couple of seconds to talk about our migration tool very quickly. On your tables, there is a little flyer. This flyer, if you fill it in and give it to us, we will give you a license for 100 gigabytes of migration up to Office 365 or SharePoint 2016 for free. So if you'd like to have a go with the tool, fill that in, give it to myself or one of the other AvePoint colleagues, and we can get you some licenses sorted. We can migrate from all these different sources. So particularly things like Lotus Notes and Quicker, things that were never meant to go into SharePoint. We can bend that data so it fits into a SharePoint form. So yeah, I think I've got time. Let's have a really quick look at how this works. And then we'll finish up and we'll take a break. So let me just share my screen. All right, I'm going to try and do this live. That's my little caveat before we go any further. So I'm going to log into the migration tool. I just want to show you sort of how, using a tooled approach, it can be quite easy to go to do something such as this. I've got a SharePoint 2003 site just here, and I would like to migrate up to an Office 365 site. Okay, so relatively trivial example. So in the migration tool, these are all of the different places that we let you migrate from. So let's do SharePoint, because that's what we're talking about here. It then gives me like a tree view of kind of a left-hand side and a right-hand side. Left-hand side being my source, right-hand side being my destination. So I can now go through and just pick the things I want. So I know within my intranet, these documents are in the accounting area, in the document library. I could pick up everything, but it's quite likely that you'll be picking individual kind of pieces out. And there we go. I'll pull that documents really fast down here. Documents, perfect. And I want to push that over to Office 365. So here's my Office 365 site. I'm going to throw it here. So we're going to Office 365. Oops. And I can choose it. Now, in reality, if you're doing a huge migration, particularly the scale that Andy's going to talk to you about after the break, would you have users going through here and clicking every single mapping of where the data's going? Probably not. You'll probably write some scripts to automate the tool of choice that you're using. So this is a small example. And again, Andy, I think, will probably talk about some of the challenges around scheduling and how scheduling is not just a IT challenge, but some of the unique challenges you get in different environments. So we do the migration. It's being a little bit slow. We'll just leave that a second. Here we go. Let's just throw it in there. So then the next thing that I need to do is I need to configure what we call a profile. And a profile is like, how am I going to do that migration? What settings am I going to take? And one of the benefits of using a migration tool is we can use these to help tidy things up. So there's a great example, a customer on our website that used SharePoint 2007 and had loads of calendars, masses and masses of calendars, okay? And they decided as part of the migration, if an event in a calendar was more than 1 year old, they wouldn't migrate it. Pretty reasonable thing to do. You can just configure a policy, a few clicks to say don't migrate events more than 1 year old. So again, when I say about restructuring and tooled approaches, it makes it quite easy to do things like that. You can filter out certain file types. So if you're migrating from the file system, we decide we're not going to migrate MP4 files, potentially. Okay, so you go through and you fill in various different settings, thinking about mappings as well. So this is another interesting one that people tell me is a challenge with going to Office 365. They say, I've got this on-premise system, and my users log in with something like Contoso/Richard. But in Office 365, they log in with richard.barrett@contoso.com. And that's seen as a big challenge. The tool can just map those names over kind of really, really quickly for you. So again, another one of the benefits. So again, not going to kind of go through everything today. If you're interested, if you want to have a go at using it, feel free to fill in the information, drop it to myself, one of my colleagues. We'll sort you out of a 100 gigabytes license, and you can, if that's all you've got, you can do your migration for free. If not, at least you can start it and trial it for you. Cool, we'll jump out there and go back to the slides. Cool, and we'll just move forward. So there's some quotes of why customers chose our migration tool. But the other option is kind of a migration service. So Microsoft, if you're going to Office 365, do offer some migration services for free. Okay, there's something called Fast Track that comes with your subscription, and depending what format your data's in, they will pick your data up and move it into SharePoint or OneDrive for Business for you, or as part of your subscription cost. The challenge with Fast Track is there's a limited range of sources, and all of that stuff around the flexibility of filtering out old calendar events, restructuring, you can't really do that. It's kind of a pick up and shift. But again, being honest, if you want to pick something up and just move it from A to B, worth looking at Fast Track. Obviously, Andy's going to give you an example after the break, how the MOD chose a services organization to do their work on their behalf. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to do this. But I guess the benefit of this is your migration's being done by someone else. You've got someone else to blame. Always sounds good. Restructuring and cleansing of data can be included. The project plan is someone else's responsibility. It can look like the largest investment, right? In terms at the start of the project, I've got this cost for migration. I'm going to be honest. But what we would say is that it's probably the most accurate way of estimating how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost, rather than using lots of internal resources. So that's an option as well. Anyways, migration options. We've got manual migrations. We've discussed some of the pros and cons around that. Kind of scripted approaches, get some of your developers or some of your clever IT guys to do some stuff for you. A tooled approach, obviously using something like our migration tool, or migration services. Obviously, we offer services, or there's partners in the room that will also offer you services today. So, just before we take questions, I just want to shout out something else. We're back here in July, and we're going to do that migration session in one day. So I tried to rattle through that in 35 minutes. We've actually got an entire day workshop. We ran some of them last year. Had some really great feedback. There's no charge for the event. So if you'd like to delve into that in a lot more detail, how I do discovery, the different options for discovery, how I analyze it, we give you some tangible takeaways, example project plans for a migration, example governance documents for SharePoint. We're going to talk through kind of different ways to do adoption. So yeah, really kind of cool. Free event. If you want to sign up, feel free to fill your details in. I've also just pulled out the link there to the hybrid SharePoint report that I mentioned earlier. So conscious we've spoke a lot there. I saw a lot of you taking photographs, which is great, because that says to me that you must like some of the slides. Any sort of questions, any comments?